This is the Louie Tee Network.
In the lab room.
10 minutes or less. Baltimore Ravens.
Welcome, you are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the program, 10 minutes or less, Baltimore Ravens. Cue up the clock. Here we go. So, you look at the Baltimore Ravens, and you gotta go season rewind, and this was an ominous start for the Ravens. They had the scheduling snafu with the Baltimore Orioles, which lands them on the road opening week of the season. They open the season at Denver and get trounced. And I had said this in the offseason that the Ravens had sold their souls to the devil for that Super Bowl title that they got in 2012. Now look, I'll be the first to tell you, if you can get a Super Bowl title, get a Super Bowl title. However, you don't want to sell your soul for it if you don't have to, but they had to, they did it, and now they had to suffer the consequences. So you lose all of the guys to either retirement or free agency or trade in the offseason, and so your roster is somewhat depleted. You do a good job of doing damage control, as only Ozzie Newsome can, but that trade of Anquan Boldin was suffocating. I mean, it was backbreaking. It was devastating. And after the trade, I looked around and I said, who in the hell is Joe Flacco going to throw the football to? And Torrey Smith raised his hand and said, hey, I'm still here. And Dennis Pitta said, hey, I'm still here. And I said, okay, maybe you can get by with those guys. You sprinkle in a little bit of Double J, Jacoby Jones, and one of those other guys steps up, and maybe you can get by. Then Dennis Pitta goes down in training camp with a hip injury, and all hell breaks loose. And all of a sudden, it all comes full circle. Who the hell is Joe Flacco going to throw the football to? That was the question all season long. And before you knew it, you looked up, and the Ravens were 3-4 going into their bye week. They come off the bye, and they proceed to lose 2 out of their next 3, and they end up at 4-6, and they're at a crossroads in their season. I had given up on them a long time ago at this point, and they actually summons up the strength to win 4 consecutive games, and it looked like, don't look now, here comes the Baltimore Ravens. I had left them for dead to drown in the ocean, no life-saving device. They were supposed to be done. They were buried. Here they come. All of a sudden, 4 straight wins. They're getting it done. They look like a team that you want no part of going into the postseason. And then, in the last 2 weeks of the season, they're outscored 75-24. They lose both of those games, and they finish up the season 8-8 and miss the postseason. So you look at the Ravens and what transpired last season in 2013 to put them in a position to where they are now to try to get back on top of that mountain. And we talked about all of the cap casualties and all the guys that retired and how this roster, this Super Bowl roster, was depleted going into 2013. I didn't think the Ravens had a shot going into last season. I didn't think that team was built to withstand the charge that was going to come at them from other teams around the league looking to knock the king off of the mountain. And so I didn't think they would be able to make a run back at the Super Bowl. But the playoffs and maybe even having some traction within their own division, I thought maybe they could hold their own, but I knew it was going to be a tough road for them. But that Anquan Boldin trade, the Dennis Pitta injury really crippled them. This offensive line was anemic. Ray Rice had nowhere to run. Neither did Bernard Pierce. The worst rushing per average in the National Football League, 3.1 yards per carry. Whew! That's funky on any level you try to slice it. It's bad football when you can't run, and the Ravens couldn't run last year. So now you fast forward to the 2014 offseason. Glad that's done if you're a Ravens fan. Now, you've gotten out of salary cap hell. You've got a little bit of money to spend. And you know how this salary cap thing works. The salary cap ceiling might be raised next season. Right now, the Ravens are staring at about $11.2 million of cap space. Again, that's a fluid situation, whether you release some guys or you void some contracts, whatever the case may be, have guys restructure. That number can always be elevated. So look for the Ravens to be some players in free agency. And you know the positions of need. I feel like the whole left side of the offensive line. And before we get to needs, let's look at the list of free agents that the Ravens have in 2014. So you look at the list in front of you. All of the players are listed. You've got Michael Orr, Corey Graham, Tandon Doss, Jacoby Jones, Dallas Clark, Ed Dixon, Dennis Pitta, Eugene Monroe, Arthur Jones, Terrence Cody, Daryl Smith, Corey Graham, and the last two being James Ahitabo and Jeremy Miles. So you look at that list, and all of the players in purple are the ones I feel the Ravens should hang on to. That being Michael Orr, Jacoby Jones, Dennis Pitta, Arthur Jones, Daryl Smith, and James Ahitabo. So you look at that list, and of course, the last two on that list, Tandon Doss, Albert McClellan, are both restricted free agents. So you look at this list for the Ravens, they're in yellow. You look at the list for the Ravens, and there's only one player here listed that is worthy of a franchise tag, that being Dennis Pitta. I don't think you want to go down that route with him, however, because he's already made it known that, hey, if you try to franchise me, I want to be tagged as a receiver. There's a big difference in pay when you're talking about a receiver versus a tight end. We're talking about upwards of $5 million in difference. So he has a gripe there, and he wants to be paid. Dennis Pitta is owed money because of what the Ravens did to him last year in free agency. So, yeah, he definitely has a gripe, and so you need to get a long-term deal done with Dennis Pitta. Feel like Michael Orr is a guy that you want to bring back. I think you should bring back Jacoby Jones just because of what he means to your special teams unit. You need to bring Jacoby Jones back. I thought Daryl Smith was actually an upgrade over Ray Lewis. Yes, I just said an upgrade over Ray Lewis inside that defense at that linebacker position. And you look at James Ahitabo, I thought he was a revelation. I mean, I actually thought he played better than Bernard did at the safety position when you won the Super Bowl. So I think there are guys you definitely need to bring back on this list. And if they're talking with some sense, if the dollars make sense, make the deal, bring these guys back. If the dollars don't make sense, then you need to look elsewhere. And so you traded for Eugene Monroe. I don't know how much money he's going to be looking for, how you feel about him, but I feel like the whole left side of that offensive line can be revamped. Speaking of which, let's go to team needs. And you look at the Ravens and their team needs, and I feel like that whole left side, let's start there. The whole left side of that offensive line needs to be revamped. I'm talking about Eugene Monroe. If you feel good about him and he's not asking for a high price tag, hey, maybe you can work something out. But if not, you might need to go ahead and fix that problem over there, because I don't like A.Q. Shipley, and I don't really like what you were doing on that left side of the offensive line. I think Gino Gradkowski and what you have on that right side with Orr, you need to bring him back, of course. And your big right guard yonder, I feel like you're fine over there on the right side of the offensive line if you bring Michael Orr back. And so I think that's what you need to do, bring Michael Orr back, keep that right side of the line intact, and then start revamping the left side of that offensive line and get some space for these running backs to run. Speaking of running backs, what the hell is Ray Rice doing knocking females unconscious? You know better than that, Raymond. You know better than that, Raymond. However, let's get back to the issue at hand. Tight end now. You need tight end help. You got to bring Dennis Pitta back, but Ed Dixon and Dallas Clark are also free agents. So you probably need to either bring one of those guys back. If neither of them are back, then you need to bring someone else in. And I don't like the free agent crop out there. at tight end. You need to go in the draft and find you another tight end if you can't bring either one of those guys back. You need to get younger at the tight end position if you don't bring Dixon and Pitta back. If you bring both of them back, you probably can go and bring in some guy to block as a tight end and get one of those out on the market. But if you let Pitta or Dixon go, you need to go in the draft and find you a young tight end. And of course, the elephant in the room, wide receiver. I think your first pick in the first round needs to be a wide receiver. You don't need to go in the look. You might need to double up on receiver. So go get one in free agency, but make sure it's not a top dollar, high priced wide receiver. Go get you a nice bargain basement deal in free agency and then turn around and get you some in the draft in the first round at the wide receiver position. As you can tell, my time here is up. That's been the Baltimore Ravens in 10 minutes less.
10 minutes or less. Like the content? Want more? Sub up.
In the lab room.